Opening day is finally here, and I've got a really good feeling about today's matchup. Yes, come on in to Braves Today for Thursday, March 27th, opening day for Major League Baseball. This is your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on X, Braves_Today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. And as always, all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. And today, it's finally here, right? This is the thing that we've been waiting for all offseason. All of the nervousness on my part about what to talk about today, all of that, we now have actual games that matter. The Atlanta Braves take on the San Diego Padres this afternoon. Michael King versus Chris Sale. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about attacking Michael King. Let's talk about how Chris Sale's done against this lineup. The top storylines and things here. Real quick announcement I do want to make. We had teased earlier in the week about going live on Braves Today after the show. After the game on Thursday. And I said the hope is to go live right after the game and do some sort of live show for you. And I've got to pull that back a bit, because we announced this last night over on his show, but I've been hired by Locked On to be the new host of the Locked On Sports Atlanta postcast, talking about every Braves game this season. Me, Jake Mastriani from Locked On Braves, the two of us will hop on after. The goal is we want to do like 140 of the games. Like we want to do almost every single game. We're going to go live almost immediately after the game, within 10 minutes or so, in 15, 20 minutes of discussing the game, and we're done. So definitely the Locked On Sports Atlanta YouTube page, go subscribe to that. You'll get notified whenever Jake and I go live after a game. He's actually not going to be able to be on for the first one or two, so it's going to be just me. But either way, really excited to do that. Go check that out. But that explains why we're not doing live shows here, right? Can't do this here if I'm doing one there. So this show is not changing, right? We're still going to have this show. We're still going to do everything that we do. That is just something else that I'm doing in addition to Braves Today. And all right, let's get to this series, today's matchup, really, because I feel strangely good about this. And a lot of people are confused. Why? Because your history against the Padres, if you are prone to recency bias, if you just look at the most recent stuff, is terrible. You lost to them in the wild card round 2-0. You were outscored by 5 games. It was like one of them was a shutout. You were shut out 4-0 in game 1. And then 5-4 was the loss in game 2. And it was ended up being the last Brave start of Max Fried as well. But I feel really good about this. And I'm still trying to figure out, is that the Chris Sale thing? Is that the health thing? Why do I feel so good about this? So let's break down the different components of this game and figure out, why does sportsbooks and everybody else have the Braves favored on the road in San Diego? And the first thing for me on this is I do think Atlanta's lineup is better than San Diego's lineup, right? So if you look at who Atlanta's going to be rolling out there for opening day, I could be wrong on this order, but this feels like this is the order. We talked about it earlier in the week. Jurickson Profar in left, Austin Riley in the 2-hole, Matt Olson, Marcell Ozuna hitting cleanup, Michael Harris, Ozzie Albies, Drake Baldwin, Jared Kelenic, Orlando Arcia. Feels like that's going to be the lineup. Okay? Yes, Arcia is a black hole. We covered that yesterday. But San Diego, their lefty hitting lineup, has a bottom 3 that I don't quite think people appreciate how unproven and or not good that is. So, Luis Ariz leading off. We've talked about him a singles merchant before. I say that he had a game against Atlanta maybe in 23 where he popped 2 homers. But for the most part, he does one thing really well, which is hit singles. Fernando Tatis Jr. and right. I mentioned yesterday, I don't think he's the same Fernando Tatis that he was prior to the steroid suspension. Jackson Merrill in center. Very promising young player. Looked very good last year. Was one of the Rookie of the Year finalists behind Skeens. Manny Machado at third. Manny's still Manny, right? Xander Bogaerts at short. Defensively, I don't think he's that good. He's also stuck there for another decade. They're in trouble. Jake Cronenworth at second base. He struggled last year. I know because I had him in Dynasty and I finally had to just bench him completely. Yuli Gurriel. Former Atlanta Brave Yuli Gurriel is probably going to start at DH for San Diego tomorrow. He is he officially 41 now? No, he's 40 years old. He turns 41 in June. He spent almost the entirety of last year with the Braves playing first base in Gwinnett. 75 games. He hit .292 with an .863 OPS, 12 homers, 49 strikeouts in 75 games. And then right before the deadline for postseason eligibility, Atlanta traded him to the Kansas City Royals. I think it was just for cash considerations. And the Royals put him on the roster because they had an injury to Vinny Pasquantino. And 18 games in the regular season, he hit .241, no homers, 3 doubles was all the extra base hits he had, 15 strikeouts in 18 games. So, Yuli Gurriel at DH, Brandon Lockridge in left. He made the roster over Connor Joe. Connor Joe was set to be the platoon partner with old friend Jason Hayward. Brandon Lockridge won the job instead. 28-year-old former Yankees draftee out of Braves territory. Came out of Troy University in Troy, Alabama. He got 12 games last year, hit .167. In spring this year, though, hit .356 for the Padres, won a job on opening day. And catcher Elias Diaz behind the plate, who was traded from Colorado to San Diego, hit .190 for San Diego last year, although only 12 games. So, I feel like Atlanta's lineup. I like Atlanta's top 6. Profar, Riley, Olsen, Ozuna, Harris, Albies. I like Atlanta's top 6 better than San Diego's top 6. And I think Atlanta's bottom 3, young Drake Baldwin, compares favorably to Lockridge, right? As far as potential, kind of an unknown. Jared Kelenic versus Yuli Gurriel. Does Kelenic have more? Can he figure out more than Gurriel has left in the tank? And then Orlando Arcia versus Elias Diaz is two black holes trying to see which one absorbs the other. I still like Atlanta's lineup better. Bullpen-wise, I will concede on this one. I do think that the Padres' bullpen is probably a little bit better than Atlanta's bullpen right now, simply because you have more known quantities. That's been the big thing we've been talking about with the Braves' bullpen is you have your top guys, and then you have questions. And even some of the top guys, like for some reason, I don't know, I've become like this guy who's just down on Pierce Johnson. Whereas the Padres, your bullpen is Robert Suarez, Jason Adam, who they acquired from the Rays in July last year. I like Jason Adam a lot. He had an ERA last year under 2. I think he's probably better than Suarez, but Suarez is the closer. And so, like, their top 2 versus our top 2 of Iglesias and Pierce Johnson, I like Iglesias over Suarez. I like Adam over Pierce Johnson. And so the edge here on the bullpen probably goes to the Padres. I do think that is dependent, though, on the starter going a little bit deeper. I think Atlanta's lefties, Dylan Lee and Aaron Bummer, I think they're better than Adrian Morejon and Yuki Matsui. And then I guess they have Wandy Peralta, and we have Jose Suarez. So, like, we each have a third lefty in there. But I do like Atlanta's options in the pen more than I like San Diego's options in the pen. But really, to me, Braves have the lineup edge. Padres have the bullpen edge. This whole thing comes down to the starters. And it's Chris Sale versus Michael King. And that is a heck of a matchup. We'll break that down next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Chinook Seedery. These are the absolute largest and best sunflower seeds on the market. 8 different flavors. You can buy a sampler pack if you want to try them all. Lemon pepper, the custom flavor of Bobby Witt Jr., Royal Shortstop, jalapeno ranch, smokehouse barbecue, hatch chili, dill pickle. I got to try that one. Cinnamon toast, Parmesan and pepper, and the classic original, which is just a balanced mixture of saltiness and sweetness. It's great. So, once you've tried the sample pack and you know which ones you like and which ones you don't, you can either buy a case of the varieties and just have all of them, or you can build your own with just the flavors you love. ChinookSeedery.com, promo code BRAVES, gets you 10% off and free shipping on orders over $40. Again, ChinookSeedery.com, it's CHINOOK, Seedery.com, promo code BRAVES for 10% off. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsey Crosby just excited about this matchup. Chris Sale versus the San Diego Padres. And I think part of the reason I'm excited about this is because you saw this last year, twice. Chris Sale faced the Padres on 2 separate occasions last year, and they weren't really that successful against him, okay? In those 2 starts, 12 innings, Chris Sale, 0.75 ERA, 1 run allowed on 9 hits. He went 2-0. He got both wins in there. Struck out 13 batters, walked only 2. And the way that these went were pretty dominant. The 1 run he allowed. So back up. The first start was 7 innings in Truist Park. 7 shutout innings in a 3-0 Braves victory in May. And this was one Sale was working around some stuff. He gave up 5 hits, but again, no runs. And all of them were, if I remember right, all but 1 were singles. It was single in the first to Jurickson Profar. You don't have to worry about that this year. You got that guy. Single in the second to Manny Machado. Lead off, and then 2 strikeouts and a ground out, inning over. Double in the third, 1 out double, strikeout, fly ball, inning over. In the fourth, he gave up back-to-back 2-out singles. Donovan Solano, Ha-Seong Kim, and then got a fly out to win the inning. Guess what? Ha-Seong Kim is not even on this roster. He left. Donovan Solano, not on this roster. There's actually very little success on this current roster against Chris Sale. I say that. There's two big outliers here, right? The only 2 Padres that have more than 10 at-bats against Chris Sale have done well, right? Manny Machado, 23 at-bats. He's hitting .348 with a homer and 2 RBI, okay? Xander Bogaerts, who was teammates with Chris Sale, obviously, .353 in 17 at-bats, 1 homer, 1 RBI. Everybody else isn't doing that well. And it's funny because when you look at a guy like Fernando Tatis Jr., he was really good against sliders last year. He was, I think, the only one of their guys that was top quartile against sliders. But it wasn't Chris Sale's slider. And I think that's probably a difference. I don't believe Tatis had a hit in either game against the Braves last year against Sale. And last season, he hit .293 against righties. He hit only .225 against lefties. It really lines up well because for the most part, they struggled with lefties as a group last year. You're throwing not only a lefty, but one of the best lefty pitchers on the planet with one of the best individual pitches in that slider. This is something Chris Sale's slider last year was the second best slider in all of baseball on run value at +24. Dylan Cease had 25 plus 25 run value. So he beat Chris Sale by 1. Dylan Cease also threw 240 more sliders than Chris Sale did. Chris Sale threw 1,135. Dylan Cease threw 1,372. So you could argue by run value per 100 pitches, Chris Sale's slider on StatCast is the best slider in baseball. I feel really good about this matchup. It doesn't feel like he's had success against them. Not only that, but they're two guys that have had success. Or correction, there's only two guys on their team that have had success. And arguably the hitter of theirs that can do the most damage, that can just go off, is not really good against lefties in Fernando Tatis. It's a good matchup from a pitching perspective for the Braves. But it's also a pretty decent pitching matchup for the Padres because they get Michael King. And what he did against Atlanta is absurd. But I think this could go better for the Braves. We'll break that down next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today, Lindsey Crosby talking about today's matchup between the San Diego Padres and the Atlanta Braves. Opening day, Chris Sale versus Michael King. We'll be talking all about it tomorrow on the show, I'm sure, as well as looking a little bit at the Friday matchup and anything big that stood out to us from the game. And the Michael King matchup arguably is tough, right? You didn't face him in the regular season at all. The only time you saw him in the postseason was 7 scoreless innings with 12 strikeouts, no walks, and only 5 hits allowed. He absolutely just destroyed the Braves. And when you dive into what he did, he pitched a little differently from usual. And I think it took advantage of some of the weaknesses of the roster then that could be a little bit rectified now. Okay. So of those 5 hits, one of those, the only extra base hit was a double from Travis d'Arnaud. He's obviously gone. The other 4 hits, Michael Harris had 2, Marcell Ozuna had 1, Matt Olson had 1. So some of your guys who are carried over to this year's team have had a little bit of recent success and seen him at least somewhat okay. The second hardest hit ball of the game was one of Michael Harris' singles. And upgrading from Gio Urshela to Austin Riley, and then getting Ozzie Albies being able to switch hit again, I think are both going to be big. Okay? So what Michael King did differently in that game versus usual is a change of his pitch mix. Okay? Michael King in the regular season, and these are full season numbers, but this was all pretty much where he was when the season ended. He was mixing 2 fastballs, with his changeup being his primary secondary. 28% sinker, 93 miles an hour. 25% changeup at 86, 87 when you round it. 24% four-seamer at 93.7. He had a low 80s sweeper that he threw, and then he had a slider that he threw 6% of the time, that he really used it like a cutter to bridge between the fastballs and the sweeper, right? That the goal of I really do think he should have thrown the slider a little bit harder, let it cut a little more, it didn't drop a lot, but it really feels like he would have been better to switch that to a cutter. Anyway, that's not what he did against Atlanta in the postseason. Against Atlanta in the postseason, he instead went heavy sinker sweeper. So his sweeper was his second most used pitch. He threw it over 20% of the time, and he virtually got rid of the changeup. He went from 25% of the time to 10% of the time, and all but 2 of those came against lefties. And Atlanta just could not figure out the sweeper. You remember watching this game, and they're swinging at balls that were in the other batter's box, right? Because The sinker would go one direction and the sweeper would go the other. But also, they were doing this to take advantage of some of the guys who were out for Atlanta and the issues you had with Ozzie Albies. You'll remember, Ozzie was not switch hitting in the postseason, or late in the year in the postseason. He came back as a righty only. And sweepers have the largest platoon splits of any breaking ball in baseball. Because if you're a righty throwing a sweeper to a righty, it's going to naturally go away from you. But because it's a purely horizontal pitch, it breaks in on a lefty. It comes into your bat path. So you either have to throw it away and try to get them to take it for a strike on the outer third, or you have to start it for a strike and try to have it land inside without hitting them. It's tougher to get whiffs and strikeouts against a lefty. So Ozzie Albies being able to switch hit is big. And then despite Austin Riley not having the platoon advantage, they're both righties, King and Riley are both righties, he also has been pretty decent against sweepers, but he's been really good against sinkers. He was a top 20 hitter in all of baseball last year against sinkers. And he didn't even play the whole season, and it wasn't even a good year for him. So you have a guy that hits sinkers well in Austin Riley. You have a guy that will have a more of an advantage against the sweeper in Ozzie Albies. And because of that, I feel like you should be a little better prepared to hit Michael King, especially because if he goes back to that changeup and throws it more, do you know who Atlanta's two best hitters were last season against changeups? Ozzie Albies and Austin Riley. They were 1 and 2. They were both at +5 run value, led the team against changeups. So you can neutralize his sinker and his sweeper. And if he goes to the changeup against these guys, they're good at hitting that pitch too. So he either has to ramp that slider up a bit, go to more four seam fat. Like, he has to change what he's doing now because the blueprint that he has from the postseason is not guaranteed to work. You don't have Gio Urshela up there. You have Austin Riley up there. You have a fully armed and operational Ozzie Albies versus a one-armed Ozzie Albies up there. You've added Jurickson Profar, who, by the way, was the best hitter on the Padres last year against changeups at +8, and the second best hitter against sweepers at +4. So you've mitigated a lot of the weaknesses that really got to you last year when you faced Michael King. So I feel good about the fact that you shouldn't struggle as much against Michael King as you did last year. And the goal here is, it feels like the additions for the Padres aren't necessarily better than the guys they had last year. And some of the ones who did well, Ha-Seong Kim is gone, so the defense is going to be worse, right? Like, I feel good about this matchup. Maybe I'm wrong. If you think I'm crazy, tell me I'm crazy. But I think what we're going to be talking about on Friday is a dominant Chris Sale start, okay? So enjoy the games. We will see you tomorrow. If you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you know when we drop that next episode, and maybe also leave us a 5-star review. That would be great. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.